hear that? That's not just a Toyota truck. That's the sound of no crowds, no alerts, no distractions, and no telling what you'll find next. You know, like a detour. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota trucks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty.
Welcome back to A Little Bit Culty, everybody.
We hope you all had a lovely holiday.
You said y'all.
I did.
It rolled right off, too.
I really did. I'm settling in.
My mission is complete.
Today's guest is Elicia Ybarra, a lifelong martial artist who spent 3 decades in dojos that were supposed to teach discipline and confidence, but instead became the backdrop for, surprise, surprise, grooming, abuse, and high control dynamics that nearly broke her.
From the time she was 6, Elicia's world revolved around karate, black belt by 13, tournaments, demo teams, and dreams of owning her own school, making her the perfect target for instructors who use that passion to isolate, sexualize, and exploit her as a teenager, while adults around her blamed her instead of the men in power.
In the first part of this convo, Elicia walks us through those early years, how special attention and extra training slowly turned into calculated grooming, how losing her community and being labeled the problem shaped her sense of self, and how she eventually turned that pain into a mission, teaching parents and students to spot grooming and abuse in sports and mentorship spaces before it's too late.
Here's part 1 with Elicia Ybarra.
Elicia, welcome finally to A Little Bit Culty.
Thank you so much for having me. I am ecstatic to be here today.
We are ecstatic to have you. This is something that we've kind of had brewing for a while, more in the back of our minds and also subconsciously, since there was also a martial arts element to NXIVM, but we're going to get into all that.
Yeah, the parallels.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, that's what the sashes were based on.
You didn't know we had a stripe path? We didn't know we had a belt system of colors?
I knew that you had like a belt system, but I didn't really correlate it with martial arts.
Oh, yeah. Keith Raniere was in karate. And
so he created a persona that he was a judo champion, which is still disputed. And based on his judo acumen, he had sashes to designate ranks within our company.
Oh, okay.
And so you started as a white. When you became a coach, you were yellow. When you were a proctor, you became orange. Senior proctor, green. Counselor, blue. Senior counselor, purple.
And Keith was a white because he was
white.
the eternal student.
Oh, God. How obnoxious.
I know.
Okay.
What a jerk show.
Everyone's heard our story. Let's start with yours. How are you, first of all?
I am really good. You know, it's the holiday season, my favorite time of the year, so I'm pretty excited.
Great. Well, I'm sorry to dredge up all the trauma of your past during this happy time, but we need to hear your story and what you learned from it. So let's go back in time, and I know it's 30 years that you were in martial arts and abused in different ways, and we'll cover whatever you feel comfortable with. But why don't we start with who you were, your journey, how you got started, and what some of the first red flags were?
Absolutely. So I started martial arts at 6 years old. I was obsessed with the Ninja Turtles by the time I was 3. I have 2 older brothers. So I was really into like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Jean-Claude Van Damme, right? Like that was my forte. And I begged my parents finally at around 6 years old.
We would have gotten along well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I still to this day love martial arts movies. Ip Man is my new favorite. Love those ones. And my dad put me in one of the 3 martial arts schools. I grew up in a small town, so there was only 3, and it was a karate school. And I was obsessed from the very beginning. Like from the first moment I walked in, I was like, I'm going to own my own martial arts school. I want to be the head instructor. And that was my lifelong goal. So from 6 years old, for the next 15 years, I worked 6 to 7 days a week on training in martial arts. I learned everything about what it was to be a martial artist. I earned my black belts. I did competitions. I was in the black belt club. I was on the demo team, right? All around, I wanted to be the head instructor. And so at 13, when I earned my first black belt, I had already competed out of the local circuits for competitions. I had already earned the championship, earned the belts, and I wanted to go further. So we switched me schools. We put me into a new school that was ran by a competitor that was a national champion in the bow staff, which is my favorite Ninja Turtle, Donatello's weapon of choice, right? So I was ecstatic. And I go in, and from the time that I started, for the 3 years I trained with this instructor, he began grooming me almost immediately. And the martial arts world is very small. So I knew this man. I knew him for several years before I started training with him. My dad was best friends with his dad, and he trusted him. So my dad would let me go and stay the weekends at this instructor's house. He lived with his parents. So I had my own room, and it started out what I would say fairly innocent. I remember being around 12, 13 years old, and this instructor being about 21 and like tucking my hair behind my ear, right? And telling me I was going to be very beautiful when I got older. And I was ecstatic. You know, I was like 13. This was like a guy I had a crush on. He was an older man. And by the time I was 15, he had introduced me to my first romantic relationship, my first kiss. Up until that point, I wasn't really interested in boys. I was very like ambitiously goal-oriented. And a lot of boys my age had no idea what to do with me because I was just like a little fighter. And they were like, I don't know what to do with that. And so by the time I was 16, this instructor had sex with me for the first time and took my virginity. And during the whole time that he was grooming me, he also had a pregnant fiance.
Oh my
And
God.
so, yeah, didn't live with him. She lived in a different town. And so he would tell me that they were on again, off again. And then he would be telling me on the other side that he loved me and he wanted to be with me. And I believed him. I was ready to drop out of high school, get my GED, and like raise this man's baby at 16 years old, because that's what he told me he wanted. And so finally, after we had sex twice, I put my foot down and was like, okay, you said you're not with her, but you're with her publicly. So if you say you're going to be with me. And at that point, he flipped the script on me. He told me that I was a slut and a whore, that I had seduced and tempted him, and that I was trying to ruin his business, his family, and his life. And that my best reaction would be just to leave and not come back. And if I tried to tell anybody what happened, he would blame me and he would ruin my reputation in the martial arts industry. And at that time, there was really no female martial artists that I knew that were like me. Every female martial artist I knew was like married to the instructor, right? And they got into it because they were dating an instructor. And so at 16, my whole life kind of imploded, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I just walked away and internally very much blamed myself. My own father told me that I was a homewrecker and that I knew he was engaged and I shouldn't have gone after him, and that he spent all this time, effort, and money to train me, and I instead slept with my instructor. And so all of the adults in my life really blamed me for this interaction, and my parents were upset. So senior year of high school, I move out of my parents' house. And I worked 3 jobs all through my senior year. In the morning at 4 o'clock, I would wake up every day and deliver newspapers. I would go to school. I would work at a local pizza place. And then on my off time, I would teach martial arts still. I would do tournament teaching.
Can I back up real quick? I have a question.
Sure.
He's 23. You're 16 at the time.
He was 24 the first time we had sex, yeah.
Okay. And there's no pushback on a 24-year-old person in a position of power sleeping with a student? It's all on you and none on him?
None of the parents really knew about it.
Your father didn't have a problem with that dynamic?
My dad was angry, but he was more angry at me for letting it happen. I mean, his words were, "You were a black belt, you should have known better." So,
And you guys weren't talking about the grooming that he did with you from 13 to 16.
yeah, that was not like I didn't understand what grooming was
No.
until I was in my
Right.
30s. Like that wasn't something you talked about. And when I was 16, it was what, 2006.
I was going to say, this is a different era.
Yeah, yeah. Like now it would be people would be talking nonstop.
That guy would get his ass beat today, hopefully.
Yeah. At this time, though, it was really more of like, I should have known better. All of the onus was put on me, and the benefit of the doubt was given to him. Like, oh, he just made a mistake. Oh, he just made a lapse in judgment. You know, he was just sowing his oats. Those types of boys will be boys excuses that we're not putting up with nowadays, but we definitely did back then. That was kind of the way that it happened. And I walked away really not understanding the abuse I had endured. I looked at
Right.
it as it was, I was an adult and he was an adult, and we made these adult decisions. And I didn't understand that I was in fact a child who had been groomed by this instructor
Right.
who had used and abused me for his, own egotistical satisfaction.
Right.
It's rape.
Yeah,
Well, it is.
it is.
And
It's
the boys will be boys narrative. Like, I mean, there's nobody who grew up in a more boys will be boys atmosphere that, well, I mean, I'm sure there are than me, but like I grew up in it. And at 24, none of us were having sex with 16-year-old girls. I mean, I think there was enough code to at least
No, that
check
was not
that.
good.
Like
Not right.
that wasn't, sorry that happened to you, but I'm hung up there. I think that's a real
Maybe he's
fucked up
mad about
thing.
that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I am too. I actually teach all classes on how, like, now for parents to understand what grooming is so that they can recognize the abuse ahead of time.
That's actually what I wanted to go back to. So knowing what you know now, between 13 and 16, what was he doing to groom you?
He was slowly gaining control over my entire life. And what he was pulling me aside and giving me favoritism, extra attention. He would often tell me that I was like family. I was like a little sister. And to the outside world, he would treat me very much like a little sister. And then in private, it would be very romantic. Like I was going on dates with him. He would take me to the movies. I was spending Friday nights to Sunday nights at his house. We were doing tournaments together. I was helping run his school. I was teaching 3 to 5 days a week for free for him. And on the outside, he was pushing it like, oh, I'm training her to be an instructor. And so she needs to put this effort in and this stuff. And a lot of people saw my ambition and just assumed because he was engaged and he was such a big pillar of the community and he was so well liked and put on that pedestal that he would never cross that boundary with me. Most of them assumed I was just a kid with a crush. Because, at 16, 15, 14, when you have a crush on somebody, you're awkward, right? Like, usually that's how it comes out. So I was very awkward, but he was very, I would say, I'm losing the word, calculated. He was very calculated with the way
Strategic.
that he approached it. Like,
Right.
he got my dad to trust him. His dad was my tournament coach. And when I would stay the nights with him, I became, at 15 and a half, I got my permit. So I was his DD. So he would go to poker nights and I would go with him. And then I would drive him home at like 2 a.m. and we would be out. And then we would wake up at 6 for intensive training for the next day for the next black belt test. And so my whole life revolved around him. By the time we were having a sexual relationship, I was skipping school. I had my GED scheduled because my goal and what he taught me to do was to get my GED, drop out of high school, and like co-parent raise his baby with his fiance person. So when I left and when he kind of kicked me out, what really happened was I lost my entire community and my goals.
Time to deprogram. Listen up for our sponsor's latest offer. Thanks for listening. Now let's resume our culty convo.
Thank you for explaining the grooming. And this is something that we've covered in some other episodes about the gymnastics world in Canada and the US. And specifically, just to sort of highlight, if anyone's listening for the first time, certain grooming strategies like making you feel special, you're the only one, building trust with the family so that they don't ever question the special alone time with you. What else am I missing?
Well, there's also nothing like he's the center of your world. There's nothing that's going to crash that dynamic. All your time and energy is involved with that. There's nothing that's competing for your attention.
And that's a red flag too, right? When something is all, which is hard with something like martial arts, or something that you're really passionate about because it does become all consuming. But when does it become culty? Let's get into that with your second situation. So how long after that is from the first dude? And also, was there any fallout? Did you ever see him again? Did you ever confront him?
Eventually I did, but I was in my 30s. I actually maintained a friendship with him, thinking that it was really just a relationship gone bad and we could keep a friendship. So up until I started doing therapy and I started building my business, I had a friendship. I had friends with him on Facebook. I knew everything that was happening. We still talked. It wasn't until I realized that I had been a victim of abuse that I cut all contact and blocked him. And that was in my 30s.
Did he ever try to make amends with you?
No. When I turned around 23, 24, he reached out to me and told me that him and his wife were getting divorced and he wanted to try again with me. And by that point, I was like, absolutely not. No. And so I just kind of ignored him and moved on with my life.
And how's your martial arts career going during this time?
I was still practicing and I was still teaching my private lessons because I had already built my own community of students that I had been teaching for several years by this point. And so I was really focused on graduating high school and moving out of my hometown. Like I wasn't as focused on martial arts. I just wanted to be out of my hometown and I wanted to move down to Southern California, which is where I live now.
Okay, so tell us about the second sitch.
So this one's a doozy, guys. Okay. So I'm 18. I just graduated high school and I took a job opening a martial arts school in my hometown that was a franchise. So there was one grandmaster that owned all kinds of different schools all over California and Arizona. And so I was like, this is perfect. So I'm hired and we go down to Southern California to train for a week in order to open this school in my hometown. And immediately when I go down, he starts lecturing me. He tells me I'm a very pretty girl and that, I have a big future ahead of me. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Perfect. I want to open my own school. I'm back on track. I was never I always thought I was the problem. So even when that stuff happened with the instructor, I was like, I can move on. I just need to pull my bootstraps up, get up and keep going. And so I did. And I took the job and immediately I was introduced to his son. So I went down there. I had a boyfriend that was also 23 and I was 18 at this time. And by the end of the first day, this grandmaster had convinced me to break up with this boyfriend. And so I'm 6 hours from my hometown. I break up with my boyfriend. And then the very next day, the grandmaster asks me to go on a date with his son. And so while I'm supposed to be training, his son takes me to Disneyland. And this for me was I really liked his son. He was handsome. He was a martial artist. I was attracted to him. And I was like, oh, this is the perfect situation. I met the guy of my dreams. I'm falling in love. I'm thinking I'm doing it the right way. And I'm working towards my career and my goals, which is to open my own school. So I moved down very shortly after graduating high school to Southern California to work full-time under this grandmaster. And at first, it is amazing. It's so incredible. I'm constantly being complimented. I'm the only female instructor, so I'm highly respected by all of the girls that are learning. And the grandmaster's talking me up. And then I start to get disillusioned about a year in. About a year in, his son buys me a promise ring because, we're 18, 19 years old. And the grandmaster decides that we are actually going to be engaged. So at the big event where all the schools get together to do advancement testing for black belts, his dad, the grandmaster, announces our engagement. So now I'm engaged. to this kid, right? To this guy that's my age. But I'm like kind of freaking out. I wasn't really planning on getting married anytime soon. And then the abuse started. One of the things that this grandmaster would do, because I was the only female instructor, is he would take enjoyment in reprimanding me in front of all the other instructors. So every Tuesday we had an instructor meeting, and he would sit down and he would reprimand me for everything I did wrong, but also everything all of the other instructors were doing wrong. So if an instructor was late for work, I would get in trouble in front of everyone for it. If another instructor, was going out to eat when he was supposed to be on the clock, I would get in trouble for it. And his goal was to make me cry. And so as soon as he would make me cry in front of all these male instructors and masters, he would send me away. He would send me home. And then he would bring me back privately and he would say, I'm just trying to make you stronger. I'm just trying to make you be able to take constructive criticism. If you want to own your own martial arts school and you want to be the head instructor, you need to learn how to take constructive criticism from men without crying. And so that became kind of his little game. And by about a year and a half into it, I was pretty much over it. And now I'm engaged. And the first real time that I stood up for myself, I found out that all of the other instructors had gotten pay raises and I was the only one who hadn't. And I had done everything he told me to do. So I go into the grandmaster's office and I say, sir, I've done everything you asked. I don't understand why I didn't get a pay raise. And he says, well, you're going to be married to my son soon. And as soon as you're married, you guys are going to start having babies. And once you have babies, you're not going to need a paycheck because you're going to be at home with the babies. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm not having kids until I'm 30. So no. Mm-hmm. And I get upset. And he starts to what you guys call word salad me, right? He's like just nonstop lecturing me until I just kind of give up and I leave. And I go home to my now fiance and I say, I'm not happy. Like, I don't think I want to be an instructor anymore. I just want to be a student. I've been offered a different job as a court reporter, and I think I'm going to take it. I'm going to do the training and I'm going to take it until they find a new instructor. And then I'm just going to be a student. I love you. I want to be with you, but I don't like this feeling. And so my fiance that night holds me while I cry and tells me, don't worry, we're going to work it out. Everything's going to be okay. And then the very next day, his mom calls me after I get off work and tells me to meet her at Denny's. And I'm like, okay, something felt off, but I was best friends with her. So we go and we meet at Denny's. And while we're at Denny's and she's eating her bacon, sausage, and eggs, she breaks up with me for her son and she fires me. And she tells me that I am not in line with the family goals and that I really upset her son. I am to have no communication with her son and he will talk to me when I'm ready, but it's better for me just to go home. So the first time I stood up for myself, I was fired and dumped. And I wasn't dumped by my fiance. I was dumped by his mom at Denny's.
Amazing. Wow.
Wow. You can't write that shit.
No, I remember it so clearly when I was like, why is your son not speaking to me about this? Why is he not having this conversation? We live together. We're engaged. She slammed her hand on the table and she told me that I was an instructor and I was still representing their school and I needed to hold it together. And how dare I be so disrespectful to her? And I was just like, what? So I call my mom, right? This is my first real, what I would consider like heartbreak. I'm devastated. And I call my mom and my mom's like, I'm coming to get you. Like something's wrong. I don't like this. So my parents drive the next day, the 6 hours. They come pick me up and they take me home. I'm home for about 3 months before the grandmaster's son calls me. And he doesn't call me first. The grandmaster calls me first. And he says, I think my son made a mistake. He really wants you back and I hope you'll hear him out. So when his son calls me, I hear him out. I'm kind of still in love with him. And so we get back together and I move back down the 6 hours to Southern California and I go back to working for this grandmaster. This time it was a little different, right? Okay. This time I had time away and I had started to kind of think about the things that I didn't like. And so I was determined to make it work because I loved his son. But I was also determined to stand up for myself.
Good.
So I was immediately demoted. Like you had talked about with your ranks, we have ranks too, right? You go from training instructor to assistant instructor to master to grandmaster. And it takes years in between. I was demoted.
I'm just dying to know, or are you preferring not to say what discipline this is?
Oh, this is TaeKwonDo.
Oh, it is TaeKwonDo. Okay.
Yeah, it's TaeKwonDo.
Got it.
So I had worked my way up to instructor And I was demoted to assistant instructor. And I was put under a new instructor that had just earned his black belt. So just for reference, I had been a black belt and instructing in martial arts longer than this man had been training his complete career. So he had only been training for about 3 years. He had just earned his black belt, and I was put as his assistant. So I was punished, very well punished.
Wow.
Yeah. But I was still told that it was my responsibility not just to assist him, but also to run the school because he didn't have any experience. So he didn't know how to run a martial arts school. And I had been running a martial arts school for several years at this point. So I was given all the responsibility. I was just not given the title. And I was told that it was my job to just get in line with the family goals. That was always the thing that it came back to, the family goals. And me and this instructor, we got pretty close. You know, he was the only one who was kind of telling me what I was thinking, and he was agreeing with me, and he was a snake in himself. And so he recorded all of our conversations that we had. And so now I'm like being manipulated by a lot of different people, and I have no idea about it. Yeah. And so me and this instructor, we talked about everything, including sex, right? Nothing was off the table. The grandmaster had been very open about my sex life with his son anyways, with all of the instructors. So I didn't really care that we were having this conversation at the time. I didn't understand how inappropriate it was. So this co-instructor finally gets upset with me over something, and he lets it slip that he's making $6 more an hour than I am. And by this point, I'm pissed. So I go to the grandmaster and I say, you're requiring me to do all this work. You've demoted me. And now I find out that I'm making so much less than this guy that barely got his black belt. This is not fair. And at first, he tried to like explain it away, like, oh, he has a family. He's a lot older. You know, he has the head instructor title. And I was like, okay, don't give me the title. Give me the pay. Like, I don't need the title. I want to get paid what I deserve. And at that point was when he finally like lost his patience with me. This grandmaster, he told me he said the quiet part out loud. He said, Ely, do you really ever think you're going to own a school? Do you ever think you're going to be a head instructor? Your job is to look pretty and sell contracts, okay? The only reason a man would ever want to come train from you is because you're fuckable. Nothing else.
Wow.
So if you can't get online with the family goals, then you won't be a part of the family. So I suggest you go home, you think about what you're talking about, and you come back with a better attitude. And Jesus. I went back and I told the co-instructor everything that happened, and I was fired a week later. I was fired for sexual harassment because that co-instructor had recorded all of our conversations, including the ones where we had talked about sex. And so the grandmaster fired me and dumped me for his son like a week later.
And what's happening with your fiance this whole time?
He is just doing whatever his dad says. Like, he didn't really ever stand up for me. Like, there was one time where we were all at an instructor dinner with this very important great grandmaster from Korea. And so I was like, women are not supposed to talk. So I would talk anyway, and I would get in all kinds of trouble because in Korea, right, women are not considered as high up as men. And I had forgot my wallet. And so I had said like, oh, hey, sir, I forgot my wallet. And my fiance was like, oh, don't worry, I'll pay for you. And in front of all of the male instructors and his wife, the grandmaster said, oh, well, I guess somebody's going to have to get on her knees tonight.
Damn.
Yeah.
What?
And it was like, he would make those sexual comments all the time, just kind of off the cuff. And he would never reprimand or make those comments to any of the men. It was only ever me. Like, it was always me that he made the comments, and he like reprimanded in public too.
How many other female instructors were there?
None. I was the only one, aside from his wife. His wife was also an instructor, but she taught her own like little side business. She didn't teach in the actual martial arts schools.
And just for clarity, you're not naming him, nor have you ever named him.
I've never named him, no.
Okay. Just because you don't want a lawsuit, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any proof of all this. This is just my story. All of this happened 15 years ago. So I don't name anybody, but I do think my story is important to tell, especially for young women in martial arts.
Absolutely. Even Cult Podcasts need sponsors. Check out these must-haves. Thank you, sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. Now let's get back to the show. So specifically let's just spell it out for people, the culty dynamics that are occurring is the abuse of power, obviously. You can't question without punishment. What else, Nippy?
Well, they also maintain the power dynamics through coercion. Like, there's no way for you to get a title that's equal to them. So you're always going to be, air quote, inferior to them.
Yeah.
At least on paper, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
you're always going to be a subordinate. One
of the other biggest culty aspects is, and the thing that we don't talk about often in the martial arts industry is often when you're an instructor, you're not allowed to associate with students outside of the school. So you can only make friends with people who are already a black belt. And so anybody that was in my life at that time had already been loyal to this grandmaster for 3 to 5 years. So anytime I would express my opinion or I would say something, it would always get back to him. It was like I was constantly being monitored at all points.
Surveillance.
Oh, yeah.
So how long after this were you able to get out, and what were the final straws that caused that?
When the bubble burst, when he told me that it was my job to look pretty and sell contracts, I was out within about a week. But I left. I left being in shame, and I was completely ostracized from the entire community. So everything I had built over the last 3 years was just gone. My fiance that I was thinking I was going to marry, my job, my career. This grandmaster was like a vice president of one of the main federations that people get their black belt from. Martial arts is a small industry. It's a small world. Everyone knows everybody. So I felt very blackballed from the industry itself. And so I went home. I remember calling my 2 best friends and being like, I'm coming home. I'm done. And they were like, we'll be there. And they showed up at my house with a short dress and high heels. And we went out. It was 2 weeks before my 21st birthday. I shotgunned my first beer, got a tattoo, and bought a pack of cigarettes. I was like, if I'm going to be bad, right? I'm going to be every type of bad. And then I spent the next year of my life trying to forget. I was on a mission and I was partying a lot. For the first time in my life, I had no goals, no ambition. And I felt like such a failure at my goal and my lifelong dream. I ended up in an extremely abusive relationship before I even turned 22, where this guy was a 6'4" construction foreman, made great money, said all the right things. And then as soon as he had me isolated, he got physically abusive and he began to beat me on a regular basis. And then I never fought back. And I didn't understand why I didn't fight back until years later. But after about 18 months, I was finally done with it. I had caught him cheating, and I had unknowingly put myself in much more danger when I said, you know what, I'm done, I'm out, I'm leaving, I'm gone. And I started to pack my things. And at that point, he grabbed me by my hair and he threw me down the hallway like a rag doll. And he started strangling me. And he started telling me that he was going to kill me and that I was never going to leave that house and nobody was ever going to look for my body because I was such a pathetic person. And I, at that point, honestly felt ready to die. I felt like I was just such a bad person. And I was just so evil that I didn't deserve to live. I deserved the abuse I was enduring. And he made a mistake. He made the mistake of kicking my dog. I had a Chiweenie I had named Rocky Balboa that was 6 pounds. He was my baby. And this dude kicked my dog. And so I broke his nose and I broke a couple of his ribs and I beat the shit out of him. And when the cops showed up, I left and I never went back. But the only reason I survived that night is because I had that puppy and he kicked my dog.
That's what caused you to fight back.
That's what I felt my dog was worth fighting for. I didn't feel like I was.
Oh, Elicia.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry you went through all that.
But the story has a happy ending, guys.
Okay, great. Let's get to that.
Seriously, Sarah had to cry.
Okay, so you left. Okay, so you leave him. The dog's okay.
Left, and then I pulled myself out.
What happened to the dog?
I kept my dog.
Oh, he's okay?
My baby.
He's okay?
Rocky Balboa. And I got myself into college. I started back training in martial arts again, this time with an idea of okay, this is things I'm not going to accept and these are things I will accept. So I had started to develop boundaries. During that time when I was single for about 1.5 years and I was in college working on an IT degree. And one of my former students from down in Southern California had opened her own martial arts school and she had called me and she was was like, hey, E, can you come down and help train my instructors because they don't know how to work with little kids very well. And that was my, my forte. And so I was like, sure, I'll come down. And my now husband, right, who I was actually his instructor when I was in this cult-like environment. And he was a teenager. He was 15 and a half. I was 18 and I was his instructor. And then now he's 21. He just got out of boot camp and I was in college and he messaged me and he's like, hey, I heard you're coming down to train. Can I take you out for a drink? And I'm like, yeah, let's go. That'll be fun. And so I end up flying down a month early and for his birthday, and we go on a date and we both decide that, we're not looking for anything serious. It's been 15 years. We own a house and we have a baby. So it went serious.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I decided I was going to leave my hometown again and move back down to Southern California. And me and my now husband, we got together and I finished up college. I graduated with an IT degree, a bachelor's of information technology, and started working in real estate for a while. And for all intents and purposes, from the outside looking in, I had kind of buried that trauma very deep. Nobody knew about it. I didn't talk about being in an abusive relationship. I didn't talk about the abuse I had endured. I didn't even understand I was a victim at that point. And it wasn't until I got pregnant and I had my son and I started dealing with postpartum depression that I really started to understand something's wrong. Like I felt inadequate as a mother because all of that trauma started to come back. And I could not figure out why I felt like I was such a useless person, like what was going on. And so I started to deal with the postpartum depression. And then I kind of came out of that. And then we went into COVID and my mom got diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And I delved into very severe depression. And I was at home during COVID with my 3-year-old and my husband was gone all the time because he was an essential worker. And I was battling these demons that for the first time in my life, I couldn't physically fight away. I couldn't just punch it away. And so I had no idea quite how to handle that. And at the end of 2020, I decided that I was going to make a change in my life for the better. I was looking in the mirror and I had seen a very weak woman and I was looking at my son and I had decided my son's never going to see the weak woman I see right now. I don't know what I have to do, but I'm going to change my life. And so I decided to quit smoking cigarettes. The only time I had quit before that was when I was pregnant and breastfeeding. And as soon as I was done breastfeeding, I was right back to a pack a day. And so I quit smoking on December 3rd, 2020. I just hit my 5-year mark. And from there,
Nice.
I started making a lot of good decisions. I walked away from all the toxic people in my life. I walked away from hard alcohol. I started really focusing on my mental and emotional health. And that was where I decided to run a social media marketing business. And so I was running a social media marketing business. And in 2021, which I call my pivot year, I've made a lot of changes. And one of the things that I was doing in my off time was I was watching all these cult shows that had become popular in COVID, like Scientology and the Aftermath and The Vow. And I actually really identified with you, Sarah. I was like, I didn't know why I identified with you, but I was just like, this lady's so cool. Legit, what was my mind. And I started to really delve in. I was listening to your podcast and I was like, you know what? I think I can help women. And I didn't quite know how I was going to do it, but I was like, I think I can train women how to defend themselves in a way that men don't have to get involved. And so I remember it was 4 a.m. and I had a really bad insomnia spout and I was dealing with really bad depression. And I was watching an interview of you, Sarah, and you were on Keith Raniere had just gotten convicted. And the person, I think her name's Vanessa Vargas, asked you, what would you say to Keith Raniere if you could say something to him now?
Elizabeth Vargas. Yeah.
Oh, Elizabeth Vargas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
2020. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I was watching that interview and this was in 2021 at some point. And you had kind of stubbornly put your chin up a little bit and your shoulders went back and you were like, I would say he messed with the wrong girl. And I remember clearly being like, I'm going to teach women self-defense fuck it. And I went into my office and I started developing my curriculum for Pretty Hands, Hard Punches. And it was like that
Fuck yes.
moment.
That's awesome.
It was that moment. And I think that night I actually sent you guys a message on social media that was like, I decided to teach women self-defense because of you.
Oh my God, I remember that. That's amazing.
And then I started to develop the curriculum. I called up a friend of mine who was a Hapkido master who I had taught on and off for. He was a good guy. He was a good instructor. There was no abuse there. And he helped me develop the introduction class and what were the easiest moves a woman can use to defend herself. And so I did that. And then I realized after a little while that what women truly need is not the physical reaction to an attack. Once you're being physically attacked, you're already at a disadvantage. Like I'm 5'2". Like my husband can pick me up and throw me if he wants to, right? So I decided instead I was going to implement the empowerment self-defense model based off of the National Women's Martial Arts Federation curriculum that they developed for women by women martial artists. And that is an overall concept of personal protection, right? That is situational awareness, trusting your intuition, setting boundaries, using your language, tone, and posture. And what I've found in the last several years is that what women really need is to learn how to set boundaries better and to have the confidence to walk away when they recognize the red flags so that they don't end up in the abusive relationship. And through that, I got into therapy. I got into EMDR therapy, thought I was going to be in and out in 12 weeks. Took 3 years. Did not take 12 weeks. Love my therapist. She's incredible. And now when I talk very openly about my story, because I feel like so many women that have been in any type of abusive relationship or culty environment feel like if only they knew how to fight, right? If only I knew how to throw a punch. If only I could have fought back. They don't understand that even if you know how to fight, if you don't feel worth fighting for, you're never going to fight back and you're never going to leave the situation. And so that's kind of where I ended up here and where I'm at now.
Amazing. What a silver lining.
That's pretty specific too. Yeah. I don't know if this came into it. That seems to be an emotional component. If only I could fight back. I'm 6'2", 215. I'm a big guy. I don't think about being able to defend myself. I think about getting myself out of the situation as quickly as possible. I have my kids in jiu-jitsu, and one of the tenets of jiu-jitsu is you don't want to get in the fight. You want to get out of the fight and be able to run.
Yes.
Right? I just think there's a component of like, yes, you want to feel worth fighting for, but also you want to get out of harm's way. And you want to recognize when you're in harm's way as soon as possible. And
absolutely.
There's so many crossovers because one of the things I was thinking of, we did a podcast a couple weeks ago about this book, Fawning. I don't know if you heard the episode.
This is exactly what I was going to bring up with you.
And there's so many societal signals that say, oh, we need to cater to this behavior to feel safe. But really the behavior is a precursor to abuse. And a lot of people, because they're so focused, well, I'm saying people are women, because they're so focused on being safe, they don't recognize that's danger.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And
in society, we are definitely taught that it is feminine to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And to be just as nice and as polite and as meek as possible. But statistics and studies show us that nice and meek and polite is what makes us a target for predators. And so when I talk about it in my classes, the one thing I tell women is, like, avoiding the danger, situational awareness and trusting your intuition is how you stay safe. It's not the physical part I'm going to teach you, right? It's not the palm strike or the throat punch. It is recognizing, hey, this guy doesn't know how to handle his anger, or recognizing, hey, this guy I'm dating is driving erratically every time he gets mad at me. I don't need to be around that. And really understanding how to set boundaries for yourself to improve your life. And I developed a quick worksheet that is just 5 questions. I'll go over it real quick with you guys because I'd like your opinion on it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That I have all my students do. It's called Building the Ideal Version of Yourself. And it's how I started setting boundaries in my own life. And the first question is, you visualize, what does the ideal version of you look like? What does her hair look like? How does she show up every day? And then you ask, what does she feel like? How does she wake up? Is she happy? Is she excited? And then you ask, what are her boundaries? And you take yourself out of the moment, right? Usually when we set a boundary, we're emotionally reacting to something we don't like. But if we take ourselves out of that moment and we start setting boundaries for the way we know we want to be treated, now there's not an emotional component to it. It's much easier to stand by what you do. And then you ask yourself, how does she handle her boundaries being disrespected? You know, does she yell? Does she scream? Does she simply get quiet and say, I don't allow people to talk to me that way? And then finally, who does she allow in her life? And once you're answering those questions, you can start to really set the boundaries for yourself so that you simply just don't allow people that are toxic or abusive in your life. Because the moment that they treat you in a way that you don't like, you don't have to talk yourself out of it. Now you're just like, oh no, I don't allow people to talk to me that way. I don't allow people to treat me that way. And that is really how we keep women and people in general safe. That's how we get people to not join those cult-like environments, is by recognizing those little abuses of power, those pushing of the boundaries.
Yeah, I was going to say, this doesn't just apply to women. I think when you're able to articulate your boundary rooted in a principle and not an emotion, it's way more impactful. And when people are emotional, the predator can just dismiss your emotional reaction sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Emotional. And you dismiss your emotional reaction. I'm reacting. Sure. I'm being emotional.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's not rooted in a principle. It doesn't mean it's not rooted in a real boundary. It's just been violated, and those muddy the waters, and making those distinctions, I think, are important.
Oh, absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think boundaries are really where self-defense starts.
Come back Thursday for part 2 with Elicia.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple-Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.